All right. Hello there. And thank you for joining us here at the Lions Guide Collective. And what is Lions Guide? So, Lions Guide, we believe that leadership is at the core of your success in business and life. And we're here to empower everyday people to be world class leaders. So if you're interested in learning anything else about Lions Guide and what we do, how we might be able to help you, you can go out to lionsguide.com, check out some of our free resources and so on and so forth. But enough about that. It's not why we're here today. Honestly, we're here to talk about Miss Lara Jones. I myself, I'm Dale Walls. I'm the founder of Lions Guide. And today, Lara is the founder and CEO of Be a Legend. So we met because we're both Lions lovers, and we're here to talk about that a little bit and why. But she's also a three-time Worldwide Stevie Award winner. We'll learn a little bit about that. She's a leadership and sales expert, an athlete, keynote speaker. Lara, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
Thank you so much, Dale, for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you summed it up pretty well, actually. So I'm founder and CEO of Be a Legend, and our logo is obviously the lion, as you can see in the background here. In actual fact, I started it with a lioness, and the reason being is because lionesses are the hunters, right? And our slogan is "Hunt or Be Hunted." And yes, I am a leadership and sales expert. I've worked with companies worldwide, Fortune 100 companies, FTSE 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies, helping build and develop and train leadership teams as well as sales teams. We have various different programs for that, but very exciting. I get to see and travel the world as a result and work with some world-class leaders, just enhancing leadership performance. That's one of the main criteria that we do here. So yes, keeps me very busy on my toes, and I am also an athlete. So I train every single day, multiple times sometimes. Yeah, that also keeps me incredibly busy. But I love the challenge, and I love my fellow athletes. Love being around fellow lions, as I say, and having that mindset. So yeah, you summed it up pretty well, and you mentioned about the 3 times Worldwide Stevie Award winner. I can obviously go into that a little bit, but yes, I do an awful lot, Hando.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because this has been a long time coming. You're like so busy. You're a worldwide traveler and collecting all your awards, and you're fighting a good fight and trying to save the world through better leadership, which I love. And yeah, but tell us where did it all start? Like, let's take it back to the beginning. Who is Lara Jones? Where did she come from? Why is she here? Take us back.
Gosh, where did I come from? Who knows? An alien world. So yeah, basically, I came to the States 7 years ago, nearly 7 years ago, actually, and came with only a laptop and my brain, and decided to make a major change in my life. I had, prior to that, just to give the audience a bit of a background here, prior to that, I have a bachelor's and master's degree in psychology, and I'm also trained as a neuroscience coach. And I have helped build businesses ever since, actually, even before college, during college. And then after college, I joined a fantastic organization that were pretty small, in the beginning, and helped grow them from around, if we're talking dollar wise, from around $5 to $50 million. And I was a significant part of that growth with helping build on the sales side, and also on the leadership team and so forth. But the sales was one of the biggest criteria to help that company grow to the level that it did. It's now since been sold, and it's a huge European business. So still very friendly with the original owner of that company, and multiple directors from there, and my fellow colleagues from back there. And that just gave me such a taste, Dale, for just making sure that we are the best version of ourselves, in every aspect of life. Because what that taught me back then, obviously I use a lot of psychology, in sales. There's a lot of psychology in that. There's a lot of psychology in leadership. You have to be able to communicate with your team in a way that they understand. It's all well and good if you understand how you communicate, but if they don't understand your level of communication, because everybody's different, right? We have different personalities and so forth. Then, quite frankly, it's it's not gonna work out the way that you want it to, and you're not gonna get the productivity out of your team that you're really looking for. So that gave me a real flavor and a taste for wanting more. And at the time, I knew that I was I had this mindset of I wanted to have a life in America and wanted to prove that the American dream was alive. And a lot of people ask me, why America? You see, my mother is German, so I had the option to go to Germany. I have a lot of family out there. And I think that's where I'm very, regimented and very disciplined. And a lot of that, I think, comes from that side of the family. But America just has this incredible culture that when you are an immigrant coming to America, you kind of see things very differently, I think, than if you were to live in the country and if you were born there. And I'm sure the same can be said for England. I'm sure that others may see it differently to how I see it. But being in America and coming to this country, I just saw it as a land of opportunity. It was like I could do anything I wanted here. I could build anything I wanted. And I could help others believe what they can really, really achieve. And a lot of people have known me to be very inspirational and motivational and educational for a number of years. And I just thought I want to bring that skill set to America. I actually also wanted some better weather, I'll be honest. I needed to know what the sun looked like. And I was like, what is that orange thing in the sky? It's
So
like,
Laura, real quick before we miss this point. So explain to me, because I am that American born here and maybe don't see the perspective of I can be anything, because we grew up being preached that to, really, how is that different than where you come from? Like, so obviously you grew up in the UK, I imagine. Like, what is not there that you see that here? Like, what's the difference?
a few things. Number one, the culture and mindset of in England, I just feel like it's very much 9 to 5. You get up, you show up, you work, you come home, you make dinner, you go to bed. It's the same routine every single day, every day, every day, every day. And you might think, well, is that really different from America? Yeah, it is. Over there in England, I just feel that a lot of people may feel like, well, I should be handed this, or I should be given this, rather than having that grit attitude of, if I want something, I'm really going to work for it. I have never been one of those that has just said, oh, I should be privileged to be able to just be given this. I want to be, just handed this. I didn't like the fact that if you're 16 over in England, I don't know whether they've changed it now, but certainly when I was growing up, when you were 16 years old, if you ended up pregnant, the government just gave you a house. It's things like that. They just,
like a house?
A house. Yes, a house. Yes, I did say that correctly. A house. I know, it's shocking. So it's just that mindset. I needed to be around others that just had that go-getter attitude, just had that zest for life, and just wanted to just get up and do great things every single day. And I always had like this sense of urgency behind it, because you just never know, when your time's up. And so it's always, let's just get this done. Let's achieve the best. Let's really help build others up. I just had this such a passion, for life, and still do. And I just want to instill that in others. So that was, one of the areas. And then the other is the fact that it's the vulnerability side. Like, you're taught in that culture to be, if something happens, whether it's good or bad, really, you kind of learn or taught to kind of be quiet about it. And it's kind of hush hush, you don't really show your emotions, and you don't show that vulnerability piece. And I've actually discovered, through showing vulnerability, it just helps enhance others' performance on a much greater level. And we can go into that in a little bit later. But so really, for me, it's more of, I didn't like that culture of you have to be quiet and not speak out. I'm quite an outspoken person, I'll say what's on my mind, but in a respectful way. But also, like I said earlier, just having that, I don't like the mindset over there as much as what I do in America. I just feel like people really do, if they really want to make something of themselves, they're going to go out there and they're just going to do it. And I'm not saying there's people out there over in England that don't do that, and I know there are, but they're very, very, very few and far between. And I feel like there's a lot more of those types of people out here in the States.
So what was there, when did you kind of discover that you wanted to kind of get out of that mix? Like when was it when you were growing up, or was it when you got like were you city, were you country? Like, and where did you discover like, hey, I want to be bigger and more than what's here?
So I was actually both. Well, I grew up in a small town, but from a very young age, I knew I wanted to be in America. And how I knew that is my father was actually a CEO of a telecoms company back in the 90s. And it was during the dot-com period. And he helped grow in a business and a company that were the first organization to sell voice over IP commercially. And so he was a very busy guy, back and forth to the States an awful lot. There'd be, a lot of business associates that would fly over from America. Sometimes they'd stay with us. Sometimes, I'd just come to the office and I'd meet them because I always had an interest, in what my father did in the business world. And I just became engrossed really in that American culture and that American lifestyle. And I really fell in love with it, quite frankly. I love how you guys speak. I love the accent. I love the go-getter attitude. And I just found it fascinating. I found it fun. I just found a lot of Americans fun. And so I thought, I want that. I want that. So just from a very young age, I've always had this mentality that I'm going to have my own business and I'm going to be in America. And in fact, there's some video footage somewhere of me from when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And my parents turned around to me and said, Lara, what do you want to be when you grow up? And instead of saying what most kids would say, which is, I don't know, doctor or nurse or something like that, I turned around and I said, managing director. And managing director in the UK is the same as a CEO in America. And so it's just funny that, I said that. And then all these years later, here I am, I'm the CEO and I made that dream happen. And I just never let go of it. I just remained very strong with that. And, as time went on, I had different situations in my life over in England that kind of catapulted certain events to change paths. And so I didn't end up in America as soon as I had anticipated, owing to some other circumstances within my life that changed. And but I didn't let that stop me. I didn't let that stop me. I said, I will end up in America and I will have my own business and I will prove this American dream is alive. And I will prove all the people that thought you could never do it, or even if they did think that, they thought it was just a dream. I wanted to prove everybody wrong and say, listen, you can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it.
And how long ago has that been? How long have you been here?
7 years. So May of 2016 is when I actually officially moved over. And that decision, there was a few reasons why, actually. It wasn't just like one particular decision at that time. There was a few different reasons as to why I did that. But I just knew it was time. I wasn't married at that point. I didn't have any children. I was actually divorced. I was married prior to an American. So I'm married now to an American. I was married prior to an American. So Americans have just been around that culture, and they're military as well. So my husband's a Marine. My ex-husband was Air Force, and so I just became engrossed in that American military mindset. And when that relationship and that marriage ended, I couldn't let go of the fact that I still wanted to be in America. And so, that I stayed in England for a few years after that. But if I'm completely honest, I found it quite a hard transition coming out of like the military world into civilian life in a foreign culture to me, as in England. And you might think, but didn't I grow up there? But when you're so used to that American culture for so many years and then trying to shift and change, there is quite a big difference. And so I just never let go of that wanting to be in America. And I knew it would take me a few years to figure things out and how I was going to do that. But eventually I did. And then just an opportunity arose where I thought, well, it's now or never, and at that point, like I said, I wasn't married and I didn't have any children. And so it was just me. And I thought if I didn't do it then, it wasn't, it could possibly not happen. So decided to make the leap then and there. And here I am.
So you've mentioned grit a few times. So one, the time matters, right? Because, you know, some people could have been thinking like, oh, well, you've been here 25 years and, you know, so you've had all this time, but you have not had that much time. And I'll remind everyone, like, you showed up with your laptop, and that was it, you know, and here you are 7 years later, married, got this business with a team, and you're world traveler, you know, giving your lectures and all that stuff. So, I mean, so I just wanted to, one, slow everyone down and just honor that, right? Like, this wasn't, you know, it is a ton of hard work. It is a ton of grit, and it wasn't a 20-year, you know, path. What do you think, like, what changed? Like, what's, as far as the grit aspect of it, what was it? Like, what did you have to do to kind of get to where you wanted to be? So you landed boots on the ground in America, you're here now. Like, what'd you have to be to kind of earn your dream, so to speak?
3 words: never give up. Simple as that. Just never, never, never give up. And I will tell you, like, it wasn't easy. It's not like you just come here and everything's, oh, hunky-dory and away I go. You know, there was a lot of challenges that I faced. And there was some times when I wasn't even sure where my next meal was going to come from, or, you know, where I was going to sleep that night. I mean, it was very up and down. But I just never gave up. And I do remember at one point, my family back in England said, you know, just come home, Lara, just come back to England. You know, they could see that, you know, it was very challenging with what I'd decided to take on. And I said, no. What message does that send if I gave up and just went back? I said, I'm not going back. You know, I'm staying here. I'm going to prove that this is absolutely doable. And it's funny, I don't know if you've ever come across or seen the show Undercover Billionaire, but have you come across that one or two?
I've heard of it. I think I've seen an episode or two. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like my life was that, you know, I literally, you know, hardly had any money, and I had to build up a business quickly, you know, to be able to support myself, and then also, you know, start the beginning of my dream. And you know, that show is basically, you know, it's all about where you have nothing, and you're basically just relying on communication with others and building up relationships. And you have to build up a business within 90 days, and it has to be worth $1 million. Now, I didn't have to do that, right, within 90 days, but it's not dissimilar in the fact that, you know, I really did have to figure out very, very quickly, you know, where was I going to live? You know, where's my next meal coming from? What am I going to do to be able to support myself while I'm building up this dream and this business? And one of the biggest things, Dal, that I've always said, and I do every single day, is I love to build relationships and I love to communicate. And, you know, there's one thing that everybody has in common, and that's a brain, right? And it's just how you decide to use it. And the other thing that, you know, many of us have, not all of us have, because, you know, some of us might lose it over time, and I've known others that cannot speak now, but you have a voice, right? But you can choose to use that voice in a way that you want. And so for me, the biggest thing was I just believed in myself. I do have that grit mindset of I'm not giving up. I'm going to continue on. I'm going to prove to others that this is absolutely doable. And I will continue doing it even if I was homeless, because, I mean, you've heard all of these success stories of people. What you don't see is the failures, right? You don't see the parts where we do fall down, but it's what we do with it to get back up and continue on. And I think, you know, a lot of people have this misconception with me that, you know, I came over to this country and everything was hunky-dory and I had this immense success almost immediately. And that's just not true. That's just not true. You know, there was you know, for every success, there were probably 10 failures behind it, you know, and it's basically what I did with that, and how I shaped, you know, those failures to help me learn, help me grow and overcome. And that's honestly, I mean, I teach and talk a lot about that. You know, I give a lot of workshops around, you know, adversity and accountability as well. And I mean, lots of different areas in leadership. But it is so critical that others truly do understand that, look, success isn't something that just happens overnight. You know, it takes, and you've probably heard the saying, you know, if you give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. And it's absolutely true. You have to prepare. You know, and even when you prepare, sometimes things can go wrong. And I'm a woman of action, so I do spend a lot of time preparing, but I also just take action. And I think that's one of the secrets to how I've got to where I've got to today. There's a famous saying that Richard Branson says, and also my father used to say this, but if you don't know how to do something, you say yes, you do it anyway, and you learn later. And that's really how I've been since I was a little girl. And I've learned a lot, along the way, whether it's through life experience, whether it's through my education, whether it's, through other means. But I think that's definitely a saying that I've lived my entire life by. And if you could have everything prepared in the world, but if you don't take action on it, what's the point, right? So it's very important for leaders and anybody, not just in the business world, but really any aspect of your life. If you really want something to happen and you truly believe in it, no matter who doesn't, you stay in your lane, you stay laser focused, and you just say to yourself, I can do this, but I can only do it if I keep moving forward. So you think of yourself in like a trench, and you're in this thick mud, and every day you've just got to move a little inch by inch by inch by inch. And always ask yourself, what are you doing today to get you to where you need to be tomorrow? That's a huge saying that I live by every single day.
Yeah, I mean, it's all powerful stuff, because that's the realization. I think it's like it also goes back to what you were saying about life and the culture of living in the UK versus here, right? And it's just not going to just happen, like what you want, you've got to get out there and get to work on it. And we both hashtag the lions here, but to me, like, that lion signifies that the power of leadership in a way, as well. It's always signified leadership of stuff and courage, amongst other things. But but I use that word power of leadership, right? Because when you mentioned something there as far as like the belief in yourself, right? Like there's a challenge and you're up against it, in to your point, it was the Branson quote about, just say yes and you'll figure it out. Like that takes a lot of belief in yourself. Like, and you've got to believe in yourself that you're going to lead the way. That we're not all born with all the answers, right? We're not born with the answers, and that's how you get them. There's no better way to find answers than be challenged with a real problem to solve. Right.
Yeah.
It's not in the books. I mean, yes, do you learn from the books and learn from other people and all these conversations? But the real learning is the blood, sweat, and tears of getting it done, figuring it out, and learning through it.
Yeah, it's the doing. It's absolutely doing. I think a lot of people will get stuck in, their comfort zone. And I often ask, I'm like, how do you feel when you're in your comfort zone? And, the number one word I hear is safe, right? I hear when they say, oh, I feel safe. I feel comfortable is another word, right? They feel comfortable, they feel safe. And whenever I ask, well, how do you feel when you're outside of that? They say, well, I'm scared. It's a vulnerable place to be. But the truth is, when you start breaking out of that comfort zone, and I'd love to go into this a little bit more actually, but when you break out of your comfort zone, you enter what we call the fear zone, right? And in fact, I'm just gonna bring this up. I do a lot of this work where you see the comfort zone here, and then we've got the fear zone, and then it's called the learning zone, and then the growth zone. And a prime example of this is, and people say, yeah, but how do you break through this fear zone into the learning zone? A prime example, mentioned at the beginning that I'm also an athlete. And quite some time back, I was doing these box jumps, and not padded boxes. These are like the real deal sturdy boxes. If you fall, you're hurting yourself. And I was doing 24-inch box jumps, and I landed funny and completely damaged my shin. Pretty much crushed it. It was really, really bad for a long time, for about 2 or 3 months afterwards. I had a lump on it. It was horrific. The pain was significant, and I honestly thought, oh my gosh, I've put myself out for a long time. Anyway, the time came many months later where it was time, to start doing the 24-inch box jumps again. I mean, obviously I was training in between that, but I'd been doing the 20-inch box jumps, no problem. And my team just said, we've got to do the 24-inch box jumps today. And it was that fear. It was like, oh my gosh, my brain is now doing what it's supposed to do, which is trying to protect me. It's saying, no, 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 this is danger, danger, danger. And this can be applied, by the way, in any area of your life. If there's something that you are trying to break out of, a habit, or trying to break out of something that you've done before, that your brain has had information to say it's dangerous, or that it didn't work, or it was a failure, this is going to be a prime example of how you break through that. So my brain was doing what it said, what it's supposed to do. And it was telling me, no, Lara, you're not doing 24-inch box jumps because you're not going to damage your shin again. And I had to say to my brain, no, I have to do this. So how are we going to connect the unconnected, right? It's the neurons, right? We talk about neuroplasticity and trying to change the brain and train the brain. Well, this is a prime example. So I was taking a look at that 24-inch box jump, and I started visualizing myself jumping on it. And I knew I could do it. I knew I had the clearance. I probably had the clearance to actually jump a 30-inch box jump. But my brain was telling me no. And so I had to allow my brain to understand that it was going to be okay. Now, I couldn't just go from a 20-inch to a 24-inch. So what I did while I was in this fear zone is I picked up a plate and a weight and put it on top of the box. So it just raised it just by like an inch. So it wasn't enough for my brain to say, oh, that's danger, but it was enough to just be past that comfort zone of the 20 inches, right? And I'm jumping onto a plate on top of a box, which might not be the most sturdiest thing, right? So that was a real test. So there I go, jump on that. Now I'm at 21 inches. And I'm like, okay, my brain is like, okay, we can do this. We can do this. So now I add another plate and then another plate until I get to, 23 inches. And then it's like, oh, this is fine. Then I take all the plates off and I look at the 24-inch box. And it was funny, as I took all the plates off, my brain froze again. It was like, oh, this is the 24-inch box jump. So what I did then was I just visualized that it was flipped over on the other side with the plates back on it. And I just kept seeing that. I jumped, got onto the 24-inch box, and that was it. My brain was then like, oh, you can do this. Did it again. And then I got off, did it again, got off, did it again. Did it like 10, 12 times, just so my brain started to understand that this is okay. This is not dangerous. But the key is, you have to keep doing it. I couldn't just do it that one day. I had to go back the next day and just add that into my training at the end of the training session and just keep doing it. And then what happened is, I'm just going to bring this up again. What happened is, I got past the fear zone into the learning zone. My brain was then like, oh, okay, I'm learning that, this is not dangerous anymore and it's okay, and I've understood now how I can do this. And that's where we start ending up in the growth zone. And so when I talk to people about coming from your comfort zone all the way out here, that is a massive leap and that's very scary for them. So that's why I like to do it in stages with them and say, okay, we're going to talk about your fear zone and how we're going to break through that. And then we get into the learning zone. And from that, we can break into the growth zone. And that's how you start to really apply everything that you've learned and you just put it into action every single day. It's very powerful tool. But that doesn't mean that, like I said, that's just an example of, breaking through that comfort zone and having that can-do attitude, and just, again, having that grit as well and that determination that I'm not going to let this get the better of me. And I'm just going to continue working at it and working at it and working at it.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And it does, I love, the world of information that we're in today and the exposure of neuroscience in a way that, like lions, right? In the animal kingdom, right? What's their weapon? It's their claws, it's their teeth and all that stuff. Like the human weapon is our mind. It is our, weapon, and it's powerful. And like you said, you got to understand though, that it's design. I heard something really interesting, which really put this in perspective recently, which was, like if you think like bugs, that's probably the easy example. This, like they give birth to like thousands of, eggs, and right, because that's their survival mechanism, right? Like give birth to 1,000 so that 2 can survive, right? The circumstances of the world, are going to affect 99% of them, but 2 are going to survive. And that's the survival mechanism of a lot of animals, where they have a litter, right? Like, that's how they contend, those species contend with survival, right? Well, the human equivalent of that is our frontal lobe, our imagination, right? We give birth to 1,000 scenarios in our head to determine, are we going to live or die or get injured or whatever, right? We have that in our brains. Like, that is the power of the human mind to invent and see the future, right? Like, create these mini avatars of ourselves, as if I go left, this is what could happen. If I go right, this is what could happen. If I jump, this is what could happen. If I don't jump. And that's the same, it's the equivalent. Like, that's how we've come to evolve and survive, is that we actually can, we don't have to give birth to 1,000 little babies to like extend the species. Our brain has developed to that we can actually invent 1,000 little avatars in our imagination of what could happen. And that's really cool, right? And but that's also, like you're describing, that's the power of the brain. Like, so if you've had a failure in an area, it has learned, like, we don't want to do that again. Like, that's a no-go zone, right? Because that's this survival mechanism. And you've got to learn how to push through that stuff, because it's just doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's trying to keep you from hurting yourself, essentially. But unfortunately today, like, we don't have saber-tooths chasing us, but we have different types of hurts. We have mental hurts, we have emotional hurts, right? Like, aside from physical hurts, right? Because we have different types of fears, right? So that certainly there's physical fears, but there's a lot of emotional fears that we contend with now, so I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and actually that is something I wanted to share today, and especially for the audience listening. But the example I gave, is probably very relatable to a lot of people. Another example of just having pure grit, and just jumping off the back of what you were saying about, you build up these 1,000 scenarios in your mind, and the ultimate thing is you have a choice. You have a choice to make. You can either do something or you don't do something. And I'm going to give you a example of something very traumatizing that happened in my life. And, about 18 months ago, my youngest son passed away, and I nearly lost my life. And that experience alone changed me in a way that could have completely crushed me. It could have been the end of me. It could have been, Lara as everybody knew her. In fact, it kind of really was, because a new Lara was born from that. But I made that choice. It was about 4 months after that tragic event happened that I said to myself, well, Lara, you have a choice. You can either sink deeper and deeper and go into this deep, dark, black hole and see this tiny pinprick of a light just get smaller and smaller, or you can get up and show up every single day of your life, and you use that trauma and that grief as your fuel. Why? Because even though that night I lost my son and I was seconds from flatlining, I mean, I'm very lucky to be here talking with you today, but I was given a second chance. And with that second chance, I'm choosing to make a huge, great impact in the world, with all my keynote speaking that I do, but also with the programs and workshops that I've designed to help enhance leadership performance, even through adversity. And, I have 2 other children that are living. I have 3 boys in total, 1 that passed and 2 that are living. And they're very little, they're very little. And they were much smaller at the time that we lost our youngest, who was Jack. And they needed me, but it wasn't just them. I needed to show up for them as a leader, but I also needed to show up for my company and my team and my employees and all my clients. Everybody kind of was relying on me. And it was this tremendous pressure in a way, because I'm the CEO of the company. I can't just say, all right, everybody, I'm out, bye, have a great life. It doesn't work like that. I've got team members that are relying on me, to feed their families. I've got my children that rely on me to feed them and put the clothes on their back. And I just decided, I said, you know what? Jack will always be here with me, and he's going to help me just build this into something much, much greater and much bigger than maybe I had even anticipated, And he kind of opened up my eyes to what's really out there and how short life really is. And that's why I'm a woman of tremendous action. I mean, I've always been that way anyway, as you heard the story before about coming to America and so forth. But this just, it just raised it like 1,000 times higher, you know. And when you have been through such a traumatic event and grief, and you're also a leader, you learn so much so quickly. And there are days when, you know, you think, oh my gosh, can I really do this today? And you question yourself. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need those moments to sit back and say, can I do this today? And then the other side of you says, yes, absolutely you can. And this is how you're going to do it. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you stay so laser focused and you're in your lane and you don't allow all of these distractions, you know, whether it's on social media or whatever, on TV, you don't allow these distractions to derail where your focus is. And for me, you know, I get up and show up every single day for my son, Jack, and for my other boys. And I allow him to see the world through my eyes, but also I'm helping enhance so many others' performance as a result of what happened to me. Combining that with obviously all my knowledge, my life experience, and all my education, and combine that all into one, it's incredibly powerful, Dale. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and you know, sorry for your loss. I mean, I've heard your story before, and I think when you and I first met, I think we talked for longer than we're talking today. We talked for a couple hours, kind of going through your story and all that, and you know, that's when the empath in me starts going, like, you know, that's the other thing about our brain. Like, you know, like if you're empath of sorts, like you feel that, man. And so certainly so sorry for your loss, but I admire like your ability to face it. And I guess like just to go into it, like, because that's, you know, that's such a traumatic event, like the mother's loss of their child, you know, you almost lost your own life. Like, and, you know, again, figuratively, there's so much trauma out there that people go through, like such major loss, but they can't recover. Like what, you know, what would you tell someone? Like, what do you tell people, like how to break free of that? Because it's like chains, like you were chained down, you know, through this stuff. Like what, having gone through something like that, like what is your advice to someone who's going through it or they haven't broke the chains? Like what could they do?
You have to take it hour by hour. Sometimes you take it minute by minute, but you take it hour by hour. People often say, we take it day by day. No, you break it down. You break it down. It's too much. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. I remember right afterwards, it was a win. When I woke up and I was breathing, that's a win to me. You know, I was able to live another day. That's a huge win. It was a win to get up and go shower. It was a win to actually change that day. You know, it was a win to walk out of the area that I was in. You know, actually, a lot of people don't know this, but for 4 months, I actually slept on the couch because I couldn't bring myself to be upstairs where everything happened. It was too traumatizing. It was terrifying. And honestly, it's just, you take it hour by hour, and then you slowly build up to half a day by half a day. And there is no time limit, you know, there is no end time. I think a lot of people expect or think, you know, others that maybe don't quite fully understand the grief or trauma, they expect someone that has been through that to, oh, well, at some point you'll get over it, or at some point you never get over the loss of a child, number one. But even if it's not a child you've lost, maybe it's a family member, or maybe something else traumatic in your life has happened, you don't ever get over things. You learn to work through it. And that there's a big difference, a big difference. And so something that I do help a lot of others with, because I do a lot of community work, help a lot of other parents that have lost children. I also do a lot of work with veterans that have been through trauma, and also help, you know, veterans that have transitioning out of military into starting their own businesses. And the biggest thing I always say, when any challenge you face in your life, when you've been through some type of adversity, is give yourself grace and don't expect there to be an end zone or like an end time. And the best way to describe it is that grief and trauma, when it's in your life, it kind of acts like the ocean. You know, there's going to be rough seas one day, and then another day it could be calmer seas. But the waves are always going to be there. You're always like rocking side to side. It's never just this plain, smooth sailing. You're on this path and you're never affected. You're always kind of swaying. And sometimes it's bigger sways and sometimes it's smaller sways. And you just have to make sure that as you're on this journey, that you do seek out guidance, whether that's from, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, could be a family member, could be a friend, could be anybody that you feel that you trust enough to be able to disclose how you're really feeling. But my biggest thing is talk and communicate and tell someone else how you're feeling, because they may also be able, if they can't themselves, they may be able to connect you with someone that can, but they will be able to give you the tools and strategies to help you cope through those rough seas. Because when those rough seas come, and they will come, it can be debilitating. And so that's why, as part of the work that I do, I love to help give tools to leaders in particular to help them, through any type of adversity, but also, like I said, you can apply it to enhancing your performance. But you've got to be equipped with that. So that when those waves come, you face it head on and you're not afraid. It's going back to that comfort zone and fear zone, right? You're breaking through that fear zone and your brain is going to then start learning, because otherwise your brain is always going to tell you, no, you can't do this because this happened. And until you give your brain new information and you teach it that it's okay, to feel this way, or it's okay to break past this, it's not going to change. So just taking it, like I said, hour by hour, half a day by half a day, and don't necessarily plan, far off into the future. It's be present, be now, live in the here and now. You can't change what's happened. So you've got to ask yourself, how I'm acting about what happened, is it serving me? Right? Is it serving me? And I'll go back to that example right after, I lost Jack, nearly my life. And it was very difficult. I was, having to step into the shoes of being CEO of the company and still, carrying on with my meetings and so forth. And at the time, I was nervous to share what had happened. I was nervous to be vulnerable in that sense. I think we live with this fear of, if we're facing a huge trauma in our lives, that if we start speaking out and telling someone, they're going to think that we can't cope, and honestly, it's quite the opposite. When they realize what you have been through and what you're doing, the support becomes immense. But if you don't communicate and talk to people and tell them what's going on, they can't help you. And so, like I said, it's just finding those trusted advisors, and you'll be amazed at the feedback and response that you'll actually get when you start to open up. Even as a leader, I actually started opening up. It was quite a few months later, I started opening up to other leaders, in the industry, but also, there were clients, and told them what was, what had happened. And they were in utter shock, because you'd never have thought it, because I had, stepped into the shoes of the CEO and kind of had to put a facade on as to there's nothing bad that's going on in my life. But the truth is, everybody faces trauma at some point in their life, no matter how big or small. Everyone's got something going on, in their life. And I think if we're much more open to it, to understanding what we're all kind of facing and going through, we're able to support in a much bigger way, and we can do greater things together as a result. And I'm a huge believer in, that vulnerability piece and talking it through. And maybe, you do get some coaching and you have some of that guidance that will help lift you up and get you to see things in a clearer way that maybe you can't because of the fog,
Yeah, no, and that's key. And finding the right people, the people that see your potential. And, the way I like to put this, because I didn't invent this, but I loved it when I heard it, which was like finding people that partner with your potential, right? The ones that don't coddle your current state, but help you. Yeah, you said it, right? See through the fog, right? Not help you stay there, but actually help you navigate out of it. The ones that side with your potential, that your potential is not there. Maybe you don't know that, but we all do, right? Like the right trusted advisors, as you put it, right? Like those are the right ones. And I love something you mentioned here earlier, because I think like and I love, one, you got to acknowledge the laser focus, like cut out all the noise. And, and I'd say like also like growth and leadership, there's a lot of like grandiose like stuff out there. And I love something that you pointed out that I think is applicable everywhere, is whether you're trying to grow or you're trying to get out of a pit of despair, is the micro goals, right? You don't need to go from, I feel like, a 2 out of 10, but you need to snap your fingers and be a 10 out of 10, right? It's not going to happen. And there's a lot of like, you can get on YouTube and watch all this inspirational stuff, and it's just like, snap out of it. Like, look, man, it's not a snap out of it, especially trauma, especially, but it's, I loved what you were pointing at. Like, look, man, I wasn't like, just go back, flip the switch and 100% back in the saddle. I had to like work my way up from this to that and go from a 2 to a 3. Like, that's a win. Like, so I heard you say, like, you just had wins, not big wins, just a bunch of little wins to get you where you want to go. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing that really helped me is, I had a goal. I said to myself, okay, well, I had a choice too, right? I said, okay, these are the two paths I can take. I can either go down this path or I can go down this path. Which one do I want to go down? I wanted to go down this path, the one where I was, going to be a much better version of who I was, and wanted to really impact and do a heck of a lot out there, not just in the business world, but outside of that. And, in order to do that, I had to set goals. And in order to do those goals, I had to set tasks. And in order to do the tasks, I had to have the habits. And in order to have the habits, I needed to track that. So I kind of work backwards. I say, okay, what's the end goal? What's the end target of where I want to be? And then you just work backwards from there. And so really it starts with, how I said, you take it hour by hour, half a day by half a day. But this can be applied, in leadership generally. But you start to track your habits and you say, okay, what are the good habits of successful people? What are the good habits of what I need to be able to complete these tasks, which are then if I complete these tasks, it's going to reach my goals, right? And when I reach those goals, I'm then able to step up a level and I can then continue, and I just repeat the process. And so, I've studied a lot of successful people, over the years. And one of the biggest things is, their network is pretty vast, but they just never give up, and they're always on the move, and they just keep going, but they learn. Like, if they have failures, they learn from it. They don't stop and try and analyze and say, oh, woe is me. They just say, okay, that didn't work. What can I do differently next time? I mean, it's really as simple as that. I think a lot of the time, because I come across this a heck of a lot in companies, they'll say, well, Lara, especially in sales. So this comes up all the time in sales. Like, oh, but, Lara, I feel like we need to have all the tools set out properly. We need to make sure we've got, like, for example, a website done, or we need to make sure that we've got our one pages, or we need to make sure we've got all these fancy tools to be able to go out there and sell. And I'm like, why? Why do you think that? That's really, I see that as you're hiding behind that. I'm like, you just got to get out there and just do it. You just got to take action. I mean, people will buy from you if they like you, right? People buy from people. And so if they see your value of what you can bring to the table, you don't need all this other fancy stuff to be able to showcase what you do. They're not buying that. They're buying you, And so again, it's the same with you apply it in sales, leadership, or in life generally. It's, you have to be happy and comfortable with who you are. And if you're not, you have to push past that barrier and get to that happy place as quickly as you can, because quite frankly, if you don't, you're going to constantly be stuck in that comfort zone. And so we're just trying to stretch, every single day. And this is another example I love to give, is that a lot of people like to feel like they need to be rigid and solid and just, nothing's going to break me, and kind of think of like a glass vase, right? It's sturdy, it's solid, it's pretty heavy when you're carrying it around. If you drop that, it breaks, right? It cracks, it smashes, it breaks. Well, I like to think of myself more as an elastic band, and you stretch that elastic band, it will come back a little bit, but it won't come back to the same shape that it was originally. And that's a classic example of this. You start here with the elastic band, and you stretch it a little bit. You might stretch it all the way out, and then it will come back, and it might come back to here, and then you do it again and again. And so that for me is a great way to kind of visualize when you are trying to break through some type of a barrier. Again, whether it's in leadership, sales, with your team, whether you're trying to communicate, whether it's in your life, whether it's at home, whether it's with your friends, with your family. It's just a great way to think of yourself as like elastic band versus being this rigid, solid glass vase, which quite frankly, we like to think we have this body armor on, but take that body armor off, just be yourself, be vulnerable, be in the moment, be present, and be real, be real with people. And when you start doing that, your team alone, and when I say team, it could be in a business setting, it could be at home with your family, they're going to notice a change and they're going to say, wow, like if they're doing that, that's okay. Then I can start to open up and I can, and once you start to get to know and learn more and more about the people that are around you, whether that's your team or others that you choose to be around, when you start to learn more and more about them, you'll start to piece together pretty quickly all the pieces that you need to be able to become successful. And even if you are successful, if you want to try and get to that next level and you're like, I want to enhance my performance, because again, I typically work with a lot of leaders that are trying to get to that next level or have better communication among their team, or just teach the leaders, fundamental principles that quite frankly, a lot of leaders might skip for whatever reason, whether that's accountability, whether that's grit, whether that's emotional intelligence, whether that's communication, and so one of the biggest things that I always say is come back to the basics and strip everything else away and look at the foundation, and just it's all about the fundamentals and seeing yourself, like I said, as that elastic band that you can stretch when you want. And on the days that you don't feel like it might bounce back a little bit, but that's okay. You stretch it the next day and the next day and the next day. And that's how you grow and that's how you learn. And that's when you start doing that and you apply all of those new tools and strategies that you're learning, oh my gosh, you'll see a complete and utter shift. So
it's huge. And I mean, and you mentioned like the part of, I feel like it's there's a lot to leadership, right? Leadership, you can't put a pin on the one thing, the three things, like it's a lot of things. And you rattled off a few. And I think you hit on something I feel is like one of the most important things, which is how you show up, like the example that you set. And, what I tell people is, look, that switch is always on. Like how you show up is always influencing your team or the people around you. And, I always like to remind people, like your team is not just in the office. Your team is your family. It's your spouse. It's your friends. Like that, you're always influencing people. And that's just leadership. Like you're leading how you show up. Now you're either doing one of two things. You're either enabling people or you're giving them permission. And you're like, well, what do you mean? I'll tell you. So you're showing up, like in your case, your example here, you're talking about being vulnerable. You're showing up being vulnerable and being perfectly human, which by the way, people appreciate that you're a human too. And you don't act like you're more than them, because now you're starting to play this power game, the superiority game. But if you show up as a perfectly human, just like they are, and you just have different accountabilities and responsibilities to the team, so as a leader, you've got certain accountabilities and other members of the team have different accountabilities and responsibilities, but you're all put your pants one leg at a time. You're all perfectly human, but how you show up in your growth mindset or being vulnerability or whatever, like you're enabling them to do the same. Now, if you show up, what's the other side of that coin? If you show up, cagey, I'm perfect, I do no wrong, all those, I'll say, bad or toxic leadership traits, you're actually given permission for them to do the exact same thing, right? So how you show up, you're either enabling people or you're giving them permission. You're either enabling them to grow too, or you're giving them permission to stay just the same or stay mediocre, just like you. So you've got to know, like, how you show up matters, and how you show up, like there's the what's the cliche, rising tide lifts all boats. This is it, right? How you show up will enable other people to, because it's hard, man. Like we don't want to fail. We don't want to, why don't we grow? Or why do sales suck? Because we fear failure. Like we fear failure. Why are they putting up all the websites and the pages? Because it's one more thing between them and a rejection, right?
Exactly.
They're afraid of that rejection, man. You're going to get rejected. Go lean into it. And And when one person starts going, man, I got told no 10 times a day, but I got one yes.
Yep.
And everyone else said, well, I got told no 3 times. I guess I got to, right? It's just, there you go. You're enabling them to do more. So
Yep,
love it.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, that's essential in any area of your life. But yeah, there's the sales. I could talk to you for days about, you know, the sales side as well. Just because I've had so many people come to me and they're like, but Lara, how are you able to do what you do? You know, you obviously, I'm incredibly busy because I'm running all different aspects of our company. Like, you know, we've got obviously, you know, different parts of our organization, because we're obviously, you know, leadership and sales, and also we have like a marketing branch of our company. So there's a lot that's going on, right? And I'm having to manage all different types of personalities, not just from clients, but also with team members. And you know, I think the biggest thing that I do, that I feel is very successful within our company, and why we have a company the size that it is today, is purely through the communication styles and understanding. Like, I take a lot of time to understand who I'm actually talking to, you know, whether that's a team member or a client. I want to learn more about them. I want to understand how they think. I want to understand how they make decisions, because everything about who they are, and as well outside of the workplace, is going to affect who they are inside the workplace. And how they are inside the workplace can also affect how they are outside the workplace. And so the two kind of go hand in hand. It's not like you just walk into the office and, oh, you're a different person now. You know, it's, I mean, I'll relate back to my story. For a while, I felt like, you know, I had to be that different person because I wasn't sure of the reaction of others. The moment that I decided to make that decision, and I thought, well, the ones that don't react in a supportive manner, I don't really want them in my life anyway, right? Because you want to surround yourself with those that are going to support. And like you just said, you need to enable people, you know, or, you know, you're able to help them. You can facilitate that behavior, or you can destroy it, really. And so a lot of what I do, and again, I pull from all my psychology training, and obviously I'm heavily trained in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And I help reframe cognitive distortions, you know, and that whole, you said about fear of failure, and it's the failure versus the learning, which is the fixed mindset, you know, versus the growth mindset, and how to handle workplace stress in productive ways. I think when you start to master those types of skills, and you can communicate with your team in a much more productive manner. In other words, you know, we practice active listening, boundary setting, you know, understanding body language and small gestures, you know, practice mindful listening. I know there'll probably be a few listening that understand about that, what I'm talking about, but, you know, it's just ensuring that you have the appropriate responses to certain situations, whether it's stressful situations at work, whether it's confusing situations, or whether it's really great situations. You know, how do you handle all those different types? And like I said, you know, we are human beings. We're not computers. We're not, you know, we're not technology. You know, you don't just press a button and there's an outcome. You know, you put an input and there's an outcome. We're complicated. We're complicated beings. And we have emotions. We're not just purely logical. You know, we have emotions. So we've got both. And you know, does the logic run the emotions, or do the emotions run the logic? You know, so it's a very powerful tool when you can really start to tap into that, and you unlock that, not just within yourself, but within others and your team, and you start to combine that and you work together. My gosh, it's a game changer for businesses. I mean, I know because I've done it, right? And I've been there and done it, and I continue to do it with lots of organizations now who are actually my clients. But it's just like you said at the beginning, your mind is a powerful weapon, and it absolutely is. And I think that it can be the success of you, or it can also be a downfall of you. And it's just how you manage that, and the choices that you make is going to give you the outcome that you desire. And if you desire success, you will get there, as long as you have the right training and the right tools and the right guidance and coaching to be able to do that, you know, through understanding the habits you need to do, and then making sure those habits take place, whether you have an accountability partner or whatever that might be. And then from those habits, are you completing the tasks? And from the tasks, are you achieving those goals? And then how many goals have I achieved? Okay, have I achieved my main objective? And so on and so on and so on. So if you have a process in place, or in essence, that is like a computer having a process, right? But then you tap into those emotions as well as the logical side, and you're able to manage that in a way that not only does your brain understand, but now others can understand, because now you're learning how they communicate. So you're able to see how they see you, if that makes sense. And you can modify and adapt your behavior accordingly. It's incredibly powerful. I love doing this stuff. And we actually we have this free assessment that we give people to allow themselves to see how others see them, not how you see yourself, but how others see you. And it's very powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I guess we'll start wrapping this up, because like I said, we can sit here and go until midnight on this stuff. and maybe we should find time and do it again, because there's a whole lot of other things to jump into in this area, especially around leadership. And you hit on some stuff there, but I know if I touch on it, we're going to go for another hour. But we'll find the time, and I really appreciate you coming on. As far as Be a Legend, if someone out there is interested in getting your help, how would they find you? How would they reach out to you? What's the best way to get connected?
The best way to get in touch is actually to text the word legend. So LEGEND, just text the word legend to 33777. So I'll just say that number again, but it's 33777, and the word is legend. Easiest way to get in touch, just put your email in there. We contact you, and we can get in touch with you that way. So you can follow me on LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty big on that platform. But yeah, the easiest way to get in touch, as I said, just text the word legend to 33777.
I love it. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on. Powerful story, tons of sage advice there, and I love the fact that we got connected and we can chop it up like this. It's always and I've learned a lot. I was taking notes as we went too, so I'm sure people listening will get a lot out of it as well. So Lara, I appreciate you coming on, and appreciate your vulnerability and sharing your story, and it's definitely going to serve those who get to listen to it and who need to hear that message. So I thank you very much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dale. I just want to end with, I always say this, but if I can do it, you can do it, right? I'm just about to head to Vegas, for the big gala, for the Stevie Awards. And who would have known, that 7 years ago, this young girl moving to America, and now here I am about to receive worldwide Stevie Awards. It's just incredible. So if I can do it, anyone can, right?
Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. That's it, right? Like,
yes. Never give up.
Never give up. I love it. All right, Lara, thank you very much. I'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, Dale. Lovely talking with you.
Yep.
Thanks.